Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to tell you what the best low-carb diet is. More and more people are looking for a low-carb diet, that is, a diet low in carbohydrates, to lose weight or to improve certain health conditions. And a lot of people ask me which one is the best of all, how to put it into practice in daily life in a sustainable way over the medium and long term, and how to avoid gaining all the weight back after finishing the low-carb diet. Stay until the end, you won't want to miss it. I'm going to explain all of this right now. Before I start telling you, after all, which low-carb diet I think is the healthiest, if you're new here, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell because we have recipes here every day. Lots of low-carb recipes, lots of recipes that aren't low-carb too, plenty of great videos about nutrition, health, and fitness, and I don't think you'll want to miss them. So let's start talking then very quickly about what the low-carb diet is. Sometimes you see one of my low-carb recipes and don't know what it is. Many people aren't familiar with it. Low carb is exactly what it sounds like, a lifestyle focused on reducing carbohydrates. But it's more than just a label, it's a strategy to improve metabolic health. Why do we say it's low in carbohydrates? Because the traditional diet for weight loss is a diet based on calorie restriction, where we count how many calories a person can consume per day, working with a caloric deficit, in other words, consuming fewer calories than you should. The idea is to do this calculation so that you burn more than you consume and lose weight. The low-carb diet actually came about by promoting another way of losing weight through a more metabolic approach. In other words, you don't need to count the number of calories per day because you won't be consuming foods that are rich in carbohydrates, and that would strongly stimulate insulin secretion. We already know that insulin is a hormone that is closely related to fat accumulation, especially in the central area, the abdominal region, and insulin also causes more spikes in hunger. And it has been observed over time that when you reduce the amount of carbohydrates, you are able to mobilize more fat from the central region, you burn more of the fat you had stored, you will store less fat because you also have less insulin, and you feel less hungry. So, it seems like a wonderful package for you to lose weight. Not to mention that, since you don't have this insulin fluctuation, as a rule, the low-carb diet, what they say is that you can eat as much as you want, whatever you want, in whatever quantity you want, because you'll be able to lose weight without having to count, see how many tablespoons, or keep weighing your food. As I told you, low carb means low in carbohydrates, but low in carbohydrates is a bit relative. Because what exactly is low in carbohydrates? Up to what point is it considered low in carbohydrates? That's a bit of a difficult question to answer because there are several different types of low-carb diets. There is the ketogenic low-carb, for example, where we are really strict about the amount of carbohydrates consumed, usually 50 grams per day or less. So this type of low-carb is a low-carb diet that aims to be ketogenic. It's a more restrictive low-carb, which aims to make you burn fat in a different, more efficient way, and it's a low-carb that usually delivers results very quickly. This type of low carb is also recommended for some people with specific health issues, like those who have seizures, who sometimes aren't even looking to lose weight but want other health benefits, and usually do it under the supervision of a nutritionist or doctor for that reason. There is a more flexible low carb, which is actually the other extreme, where people consume 200 grams of carbohydrates per day, which is still very little compared to the rest of the general population, that tend to consume a lot of carbs. So they prioritize sources with a low glycemic index like lentils, chickpeas, quinoa. In other words, there will still be carbohydrate sources, but they are slow absorbing carbohydrates, carbs that come with protein and fiber, which will make their absorption slower. So it has less impact on your insulin, and this carbohydrate is spread out throughout the day or consumed after physical activity. So a person can still do a low-carb diet while including good sources of carbs. If you look at their overall diet, they still have a low amount of carbs, around 200 grams, 250 grams, depending on the physical activity and health factors, but these are very healthy carbs. The person is not going to eat 200 grams of carbs from white bread. That's not how it works. To do low carb with foods rich in carbohydrates, they have to be healthy carbs. As I previously mentioned, these are indeed legumes in general. Beans, lentils, chickpeas, and even quinoa can be included. And sometimes even a sweet potato can be considered, so that is how it can be effectively done. There's also another style of low carb known as carb cycling, where you alternate days with lower carbohydrate intake, even following a stricter, more ketogenic approach. With days on a normal glycemic diet, which includes a normal amount of carbohydrates, or sometimes even up to the higher end of that carbohydrate range. And this has a very interesting effect for weight loss, especially because on the days when you train, if you work out, you aim to consume more carbohydrates so you have more energy, better recovery, glycogen replenishment, and muscle recovery. So there are many different approaches you can follow when we talk about low carb. So maybe you're wondering which low-carb approach I personally think works best and makes the most sense overall. I'm going to give you 3 tips here to tell you which is best for you to follow. Is not specifically related to the amount of carbohydrates because that can vary a lot from person to person. It might be that a ketogenic diet with 50 grams works really well for you, while for someone else, they might need one with 150 grams, right? If you feel good with 150 grams, are losing weight, and are healthy, then it's not specifically about whether it's a good or bad low-carb diet based on the amount of carbohydrates you consume. Instead, the first tip is about the variety of foods you eat, because I see many people making big mistakes with low-carb diets when it comes to food quality. Someone might have a snack of ham rolled with cheese, and for lunch, a steak with an egg, for example. Is that right? Technically, yes. When you look at it closely, the carbohydrate intake is low and the protein is high. And although the fat often isn't the healthiest, this kind of eating pattern can still put you into ketosis or help you mobilize stored fat. But what about all the issues related to nutritional deficiencies? What about the variety of vitamins, fiber, antioxidants, minerals? People go on a low-carb diet and start losing hair. Their nails break. They get sick all the time. Their digestion gets blocked up. Of course, they're not consuming a truly healthy, well-balanced, and varied diet. So it is absolutely essential that you consume fresh vegetables, leafy greens, and other nutritious produce. If you're unsure about which vegetables to include on a ketogenic diet, do the math. See how much you can fit in. Maybe half a zucchini will work for you. Check the amount of carbohydrates and spread it out throughout your day. Remember that you have many sources of healthy fiber with very little carbohydrate. Psyllium, which I have a video about here on the channel, chia, flaxseed, you can easily add these in. So, you really need to stay organized and intentional when it comes to getting enough vitamins, minerals, fiber, and healthy fats in your daily routine. Another interesting point is about fruit. Many people say that on a ketogenic diet you can't eat fruit, or that on low carb you can't have fruit. People want to eat a low carb dessert but don't want to eat fruit. Of course you can. Avocado and coconut have practically no carbs. Passion fruit, you can make wonderful desserts, and with lemon too. You'll dilute it so the amount of carbs will be small. You can even use kiwi, just a few slices. You don't necessarily have to use the whole fruit. Once again, you can spread it out throughout the day. Remember that fruits are very healthy for us, so whenever we can, we should add them to our diet. Another point people bring up regarding the quality of low carb is fat. If someone is going to do a high fat diet, they'll be consuming a lot of fat and they don't worry. They tend to use a lot of oil for frying, foods like fried pork ribs, along with plenty of bacon, sausages, and other highly processed industrialized foods. So it's important to be careful with these types of fats because when consumed in excess, they are often high in saturated and trans fats, which are harmful to your heart. They make your body more inflamed, even making weight loss harder, but overall, they're just bad for your health. Always try to consume healthy fats, especially if you are following a high-fat diet, which will have a lot of fat. So, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, omega-3 fats, which will be better for you in the medium and long term. You cannot just think about your weight. You have to remember that what you put into your body is what will make you healthier, will give you more longevity, and once again, better immunity, better skin, better nails, better hair. So the quality of the fat is very important in a low-carb diet. I'm going to make a quick note here and remind you that I have an entire playlist of videos here on the channel all about low carb, where I explain more about the low carb diet, ketogenic diet, carb cycling, talk about the best fruits, the worst foods, so there are a lot of great videos there. If you're just getting into this world now and want to learn more about low carb, really learn, even if just out of curiosity, check out that playlist. You're going to like it for sure. So now I'm going to talk about the second point, which I think is still important when it comes to a good low-carb diet, since I've already talked about food variety and all that. The second point, which I think is very important for you to follow a good low-carb diet, is knowing how to organize your meals and having tasty recipes in your daily routine. Because once again, otherwise you'll end up always eating boiled eggs and ham for your snack. It becomes a very repetitive diet, which will affect not only the nutritional quality, but also the monotony of your meals, and you won't be able to keep this up in the medium or long term. It's not sustainable because no one can, humanly speaking, eat the same thing every day. So it's very important that you have healthy, varied, and tasty recipes for low-carb foods, low-carb recipes. I have an entire playlist here of low-carb recipes with lots of delicious options. There are recipes for everything, plenty of desserts, bread, ketogenic recipes. I'll leave that list of videos for you down below as well, this playlist of my recipes that will help you. My third tip for a good low-carb diet is to follow a low-carb diet where you don't rely on processed or ultra-processed foods. In other words, you want to change your eating habits, you want to eat healthier, you want to lose weight. So why would you buy a store-bought low-carb shake? Sometimes those shakes even have maltodextrin in them, or ingredients that can raise your blood sugar. There may be only a small amount of carbs, but the carbs are of very poor quality. So it's better to make your own shake at home, your own smoothie, or your own juice if that's what you want. Why buy those powdered or packaged juices? That stuff is really bad for our bodies. Too many artificial colors, too many preservatives. So avoid ultra-processed foods. If something doesn't look like real food, it's not meant for you to eat. In general, avoid consuming processed foods. Focus on real foods, fruits, vegetables, greens, all kinds of meat you can get, fish, nuts, healthy fats, healthy oils, because that's what will help you have a great low-carb diet. I want to make it very clear to you once again that not everyone should do low carb and not everyone needs to do low carb. There are many different types of weight loss methods available, various diets, intermittent fasting, there's low carb, vegetarian diets, there's dietary re-education. If you have any kind of doubt or health issue, always remember to consult your nutritionist who will guide you very well in your city. Tell me down below if you've ever tried low carb, if you did it to lose weight for health reasons, if you still do it, how many carbs you consume, what your diet is like, and if you already followed these 3 tips. I would love to see your comment here. Give the video a like because that helps me a lot, and share it with those who need it, with those who will enjoy it. Let's work together to spread this positive movement because that's what I want here on the channel. See you next time. Bye.